Oh yeah, so today I'm making a wormery. Um, Hopefully you've watched my first video, which I only did a few days ago. Got a wormery for my birthday. It's actually my birthday today. Got my wormery last week that I set up at home, which is a brought-in one, purely because it's going to be outside the back door at home, and I wanted it to look nice. So I did spend like £100 on a full setup for the garden. But I just wanted to show you how easy it is to make a wormery out of pretty much anything, really. Again, I'm no expert. This is just reading books, looking online. Um, I've seen it done by many different people, and I'm just doing my own take on it basically now. So all I'm doing, I haven't bought any more worms. I tend to try and do everything sort of on the cheap if I can, especially now I've quit a bit of work to spend more time down here. I haven't got so much money, so I'm trying to do everything on the cheap. So what I've basically done, even though my worms have only been in my wormery at home for a few days, I think it's about 4 days now, they've settled in fairly well, and I just basically took a handful of worms. So I've just bought a handful of worms in this little pot. Just cracked the lid a little bit. They've only been in there like 10 minutes. I've literally just come from home. I just cracked the lid, make sure they got oxygen. So I got roughly 50 worms. I just sort of got them out and had a bit of a rough count. There's about 50 worms in there. So it's going to take a while to establish, because I'm starting from a very small base. But I'm in no rush, I just wanted to get something started actually at the farm itself. So what have I learned in the last few days? So what happens with my first wormery when I set it up, and what I noticed the first night, I've got them in the garage, just to keep it a bit more stable temperature and stuff to begin with, to get them settled in. And in the garage, obviously it would be dark, but I've got a grow light on at the moment because I've got some seedlings. I'm germinating squash seedlings on heat mats on the bench, and I've got a grow light on a timer. It turns off at 11 o'clock at night. I went out at 11:30, and it's something that happens. It's called worm wander, they call it. And as soon as the lights go out, it's a brand new environment. It's not got all the bacteria and sort of microbes and that worms like to make them feel at home. It's all a bit sterile and new, so they will wander. So I went in there, and it wasn't masses. You think I had a pound of worms? It was like a big double handful. I would say maybe a small handful had sort of come out and were on the floor. A few had gone into the sump underneath, and I was like, what am I going to do? So quick, I put them back in, and turn the light on, which I had read. But they say actually on the Worm City website that you can put them back into the box that it was delivered in. So that's what I did. I put the worms that got out back in, put it back in the box, and I turned the garage lights on, the strip lights, and I left them on. I've left them on the past few nights, and it has stopped it. I've had a few going into the sump, but I just kind of leave them and they find their way back up. So this can happen. Worm wander can happen. Obviously, I'm only putting a small handful in here, but they could still come out the holes in the bottom. So what I'm doing, even though I've done my extension to my barn, and I'm going to eventually probably have them over in the extension side so they're not in my way here, but I'm actually going to start this wormery right next to my compost, because if I don't want to come down having to box it up or bag it up and stuff like that when it gets dark. So if one or two drop out the bottom, then they can just make their way into my compost, and that's perfectly fine. They'll just live in there and help to compost my compost. So not worried about that. I'm just going to literally stand it up on some bricks and leave them to it. So what I'm using is, I have got about 6 of these. These are just, sorry, a few stones in there. These are just recycling bins. They've already got holes drilled in the bottom. One of my old customers got a few of these off the council. Kept telling him that his bins had been nicked, and he grew his run of beans in them, 4 canes or whatever, and grew his run of beans in them. But the good thing is that they stack perfectly well. They fit nice and tight together. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to start one at the bottom, and as it fills, I can do a very similar thing to the wormers that you buy and just stack a new one on top. Bit of bedding in there, and they'll work their way up. I'll go 2 or 3 high, and then empty the bottom one and do the same sort of thing on a rotation. Make it all a bit easier than having to try and separate the worms by sort of scraping them or sifting them out. So this is what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do, I haven't brought in any bedding or coir or anything like that. So I've done a bit of reading since I got my wormery last week. And I actually realised, I thought my worms were just two types of tiger worms. I've actually got tiger worms and European night crawlers. Apparently the European night crawlers are a bit bigger, a bit slower to reproduce, but they go deeper and sort of compost stuff from slightly deeper down, and the tiger worms are like a shallower feeder, much faster breeder. Apparently one adult worm can produce up to 10 baby worms per week or per month, I think it was. So very fast reproduction for the tiger worms, but so it's a combination of the two. But anyway, what I'm going to use, you can use multi-purpose compost and stuff like that. So this is my second compost bin, which is almost finished. It's basically not got any heat in it now at all. So that is at just under 20 degrees, which is about what it is. I've got a thermometer here. It's 17 degrees today. So it's basically no heat in it. It's almost finished. What I need to do now is I need to turn this over into the third bay and just leave it to sort of mature. And then I'll turn this one over into here and then start filling again. So it's basically compost that has done the bulk of its composting. It's done the hot composting, and it's now just needs to mature. So I'm going to use that as a bedding because it's quite good sort of structure to it. It's moist. It's just got a nice earthy smell, but there's still plenty of food in there for the worms. So it'll be a bedding and a food source for the worms. It should be ideal, I hope. So I'm going to put probably half a bin of that, because I'm only using a small amount of worms. I'm just thinking I'll give them a good base to get into, so hopefully they won't want to leave, and I'll just leave them to it then. I know that because I'm starting with a small amount, it's going to take all summer really to get a good sort of colony going. But so that's fine. So I'm going to use a base of that, and then I'm going to cap it off, because what I did find, what I did on the second day with my new wormery, when I had a few go up into the lid, even with the lights on, I had a few come up into the lid, and I thought, I wonder if it's because they sort of want, you know, a lot of things I read said that if there's not the sort of bacteria there that they need, then they quite often will sort of go looking for it. So I've got two big wire containers that I'm making leaf mold in. So I basically got some half sort of, these are damp, some are a bit crispy, but they're sort of slowly breaking down, just leaf mold basically. I put about an inch of that on top of my wormery at home, and the next day they seem to stop leaving. They seem to love that leaf mold. They're all up in it, going all through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cap this off with a good couple of inches of leaf mold. So I'll put the worms on top of the compost, then I'll put the leaf mold on top of the worms, and then I'm just going to top it off with a bit of compost bag instead of using newspaper. I've seen another guy, a breeder, who just uses a bit of plastic on top, keeps the moisture in, keeps them dark, and then as a lid I'm just going to use a bit of plywood with a brick on top. So I in this bottom container, there's the holes that were already in it for drainage when you get a recycling bin, and there's a few extra little holes drilled that my customer must have put in for the drainage for the runner beans. So that's fine. I don't need to put any more holes. The wormies that you buy don't have holes around the top. The lid doesn't fit airtight or anything like that, and that seems to be enough. I have watched videos where people are just pumping hundreds of holes into containers. You know, they look like they've been shot with a shotgun. I don't know if that's just a bit overkill, so I'm not actually going to drill any extra holes because the air can flow through. There's a couple of little gaps. The lid doesn't fit tight. It's got a slight bow in it. I may put just a couple of holes each sort of side, half-inch holes, but just judging by the wormers that you buy, they've got vented bottoms, but the lid just sits on. There doesn't seem to be vents around the top of the ones I've seen, so I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to leave it. But what I'll do is I'll bring the camera in a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing, and we'll get it started. We'll go from there. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I've just ripped off a bit of cardboard from a big box I had, and I'm just going to line the bottom again, just to sort of stop the compost falling out the holes too much, and to help sort of keep the worms in a bit. Just provides a bit of a barrier, so that fits nice and tight in the bottom there. And then I'm going to just shovel in some of the compost. So probably sort of 3 or 4 shovelfuls, I should imagine. It's a good old compost, that is nice and friable, not too lumpy. You can still, at this stage, you can still see odd bits. I put a few bits of paste. There's like a little bit of half rotted newspaper or something there. So this should be quite good food for the worms. It should keep them happy. That one more shovelful. Just break up any little lumps there. That should do. That's about half a bin, roughly. It's not rocket science. So I'll bring you in a little bit closer and I'll show you putting the worms and things in. Right, let's get these worms in. So like I say, it's only a very small handful of worms and it's going to take a while to get going. Like I say, there's about 50. It's funny how they clump. When I open the worms out the bag, when they arrive, they're all in a clump. Look at that, they've all gone into a ball in the middle. Amazing, they just clump together. Like they sort of attract each other. So I'll just literally put that ball right in the middle there, and I won't mess about with them again. They've been messed about with enough. And I'm just going to get this leaf mould. There's some dry leaves, some crispy leaves, a lot of rotten stuff. I'll just rip it up a little bit as I put it on. I'm going to put this a good couple of inches thick, 2 or 3 even, because I've got no sort of intention of messing around with these as much. I'm going to play around with the ones at home, obviously with a feed in and sort of, you know, additives like crushed eggshells and things you need to give them to help them digest food. I'll do that with these when they're going, but for now, because it's such a small colony, everything they need should be in there really. So I'm just going to kind of leave these to it, but the others I'm going to obviously have a little play around with, and then that's my learning curve really. Those ones at home, I'm going to spend a bit of time learning from them. I have a tendency when I get a new hobby to get slightly obsessed, and I can feel it happening again with these worms. Sometimes things just really really get me, take hold of me, and I start getting absolutely obsessed with it, and I can sort of feel it happening. But we'll see how we go. I do like things like this, not just because it's an interesting hobby, but because it actually benefits my garden, and should grow, better plants, healthier plants. And I think it's something going forward that perhaps everyone should have a little go at. It's so easy to do. You don't need any room really at all. I mean, literally, if you buy a wormery or use something like this, a couple of square feet, that's all it is. But yeah, I want to get into trying to obviously use the vermicompost on my plants. But I'm also been reading up and watching videos on making worm teas. So you use the vermicompost in buckets and you aerate it and feed it with some molasses to feed all the microbes, and then you use that as a liquid feed. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do in it. I just find it all fascinating. So I'm going to really get into this, I think. So there we go. I'm not going to firm anything down. A bit of air in the compost, a bit of air in those leaves, that's all good. It's all oxygenating. There's always a nice breeze blowing through here, so it should keep them nice and oxygenated in the top. So all I'm going to do is this bit of plastic, I've just cut it slightly oversized. Now just push on top, keep the moisture in, and obviously because the board is going to have a bit of a gap, it just helps to keep them dark. They like to feed under something. So whether you use damp newspaper, plastic, a bit of old hessian, whatever, they like to feed under something. Makes them feel safe, I assume. And then basically to finish it off, just got a bit of old ply, just sit that on top and put a brick on top. Job done. So yeah, that's it. One wormery ready, and ready for them to breed. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I've already got plans. Like I say, I'm getting a little bit obsessed already. I've already got other ideas, things I want to try with these worms. Whether I'll do it this year, I I don't know. The ones at home may produce a nice big colony fairly rapidly, so I may be able to move some more out to try other things. But I've got other ideas, like, I've seen people putting so buckets with the bottoms cut off, actually having them in your vegetable bed or in your flower bed or whatever, little bit of board on top of the brick, and just whenever you're weeding, open it up, throw your weeds in, throw a bit of waste in, feed the worms there, and you have holes drilled in the side, and the worms can go out into the bed and come back to feed. And it's like having the worms living in your veg garden, sort of in bed worm composting, in bed vermiculture, I suppose you'd call it. So I'd like to try something like that in some of the veg beds, and see if that sort of helps the veg come along. I've got a few different ideas, different styles of wormers, things I might like to try, different things I've seen, on the internet, wormers in long pipes and different things like that. So, please like and subscribe if you enjoy the videos, and if you're interested, and sort of join me on my my journey of my new hobby, because I'm definitely going to be playing around with it a bit and finding things that work for me. And if you can pick up some ideas along the way, then all the better. And I'm glad if I can help. But like I said, I always say I'm no expert. I'm just like you. I'm just trying things as I go. But yeah, sometimes it's good to just see other people trying things, and then gives you ideas, doesn't it? But yeah. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time, guys. Take it easy.